And just like that, the first season of Moon Knight has come to an end. I say that because this was advertised as the season finale, and it ends in a way that is definitely going to set up something more down the line. So before we go into all of that stuff, I do want to give a spoiler warning because there's absolutely no way I can talk about this episode without going into severe detail, and I'm going to give a final verdict on the entire season as a whole. In the last episode, we saw that Mark had gone on to the great beyond essentially, but Stephen was lost to the sands of time, and now, because of that, avatars for Khonshu are kind of limited in capacity, but Khonshu needs an avatar in order to be able to take on Ammit. And Ammit has been freed by Arthur Harrow, and so there's a big battle that commences. Essentially, in this season, you get a lot of setup to this moment, and so when this episode's going on, you basically expected one big grand finale. Now, something that I was talking about quite a bit before this episode came out was I didn't want a big CGI finale to end up this story. I wanted something that set up something a little more ideological or something a little more character based. And you get that, but you also get something that is a big CGI battle. But in this case, I didn't necessarily mind it. I actually think it worked in the favor of the show because there are certain... But in this case, I didn't really mind it. I think it actually did a pretty good job of making that still visually enjoyable. At first it wasn't. It was a little too dark at times and I thought, oh god, I'm a little worried about this. But then eventually you move into some city streets and they did use a lot of really great colors and visuals. And I think they did a really good job with that. The entire finale was great. It was great seeing Layla become an avatar of Taweret for a bit. So she gets a cool costume with like cool wings and stuff, and it's really, really cool. And Stephen, of course, does come back, and so you see a sort of medley going on between him and Mark, and then Moon Knight and Mr. Knight, and they're fighting off Harrow and his followers, and all of that, really, really great stuff. But the thing that I really want to talk about, and I think most people want to talk about, is how the fight eventually is resolved. Because as you get towards the end of it, when they're in a very desperate situation where Harrow is about to take out Mark, and then Layla is about to get killed by the followers, in that situation, Mark blacks out again. Suddenly, everybody's down for the count, including Harrow, and suddenly they can't figure out what happened. It wasn't Mark, neither Stephen. Now, we already had this a few episodes ago when that happened, and a lot of people have been waiting to see whether or not Jake Lockley, the other personality that exists within Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, is going to eventually be released. Well, that happens, and they finally give you a glimpse at Jake. Now, this happens at the end credits scene, because after they've taken out Harrow by essentially imprisoning him along with Ammit and using that as a way to just get rid of him, eventually Mark and Stephen are released from the Moon Knight duties by Khonshu, but it turns out that Mark and Stephen had no idea about Jake, and so Jake is still very much at large, and eventually he's still under the service of Khonshu. Now, when you have that kind of setup, it's hard to call it a series finale anyway, right? Obviously, you're going to set up for something more. And while it doesn't necessarily end with the idea of season 2 will happen, I feel like they've set up enough that you're going to probably get something more. I will say though, there is one thing about this entire season that I really, really liked, and which is you don't get any major Marvel references. Like, it's not like at the end of it, one of the Avengers shows up or something like that. You get a full-fledged, unique, individualistic show. And I'm glad that that's what happens. They dropped one reference to the MCU's other events, and that was in episode 3 when Gaspar Ulliel, may rest in peace, he mentions Madripoor, I believe. That was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's it. Besides that, there was no other recollection of anything else that had happened in the MCU. And I'm so glad that that's the case, because I would have liked this thing to have its own unique identity, and it has its own unique identity, and that's very, very important. Overall, what did I think of the season of Moon Knight? I think it was really good. I had some issues with it along the way. Some episodes I think were not as strong as other ones. I think there were some points where the characterization could have gone into, like, we could have gone into things a little bit more. That was maybe my only issue with the season. And that comes into a bigger problem that I'm having sometimes with the MCU shows, which is I don't want all of them to be 6 episodes long or something like that. It just feels very limiting. And you can't do everything in a limited series capacity. Somewhere along the way, you have to do something extra and go a little further. And I think they could have definitely gone a little further over here because there seems to be a lot of information still left on the table. But hopefully, if they do decide to do a season 2, I mean, this is definitely not the last time we've seen this character. But once they do get to that, I hope that they're able to do something more dense and something a little more in depth than sometimes you got over here. Overall, though, still a really great time and definitely worth watching. I think as a Moon Knight fan, you'll be pretty pleased with what you get over here. Yes, there could have been a little more Moon Knight in Moon Knight, but then Oscar Isaac's performance as Mark and Steven is already so great that I can't really complain about sometimes the lack of Moon Knight himself. And so the rest of the show just kept going at its own pace, and I really liked it for what it was. Despite the fact that for about 2 episodes, you get no Moon Knight. Episodes 4 and 5 have none of the costume stuff. I don't know, just think it's very, very interesting. But still, really great. Loved the characters, liked Layla a lot. Mel Kalamawi was excellent. Really liked Ethan Hawke as Arthur Harrow. F. Murray Abraham as Khonshu was great. Honestly, I have some flaws, but overall, I can't say I was a big, hater or anything like that. I think it was still a really great show. And I'm going to give Season 1 of Moon Knight an A-. Damn solid season of television and really, really great time. Guys, thank you very much for watching. What did you guys think of the entire first season of Moon Knight? What did you guys think of this episode? Were you excited to see some of those things play out, the things that you guys have been expecting? What did you guys think of this definitely not stain on my t-shirt? I don't know what that is, but it's been there the entire video. As always, if you like this, guys, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.